Welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Brad Newcombe. As governments across the country continue to cut back on social services and business continues to downsize its personnel and increase the use of technology, there is a human cost. And that means that more people are homeless, more children go hungry, and there is increasing pressure on the people who provide social services. With me is one of those social service providers, Alan Tysick, who is the director of the Open Door Ministry in Victoria, which works in and serves the inner city people down there. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Brad.
It is great to have you here because we have actually known each other for a long, long time. And first of all, just before we went on the air, you were about to tell me a story, and I said, please don't tell me, save it. You're talking about going down the laneway, 5 o'clock in the morning, finding someone. Could you tell me that story now?
I arrive at the Open Door early because a lot of the people get out of the gateway, which is a flop house. And usually there's a few that don't make it in or are asleep in the alleys, and I always wake them up and invite them in for coffee and warmth early in the morning. And this fellow that I know quite well, I gave him a shake this morning, but he was stiff, cold, and he was blue. He was dead. I went home, I called the ambulance, they arrived, and took him away in a body bag. And I go back to my office, and I write in my journal that day, Lazarus died on the rich man's step. No, he died on the church step. It was on the church steps I found him. Behind locked doors where his warmth, holding the key were the clergy. And I just, questioned the church in our navel-gazing and in our complacency. So
Powerful story.
yeah, it's a
Very powerful story. How common is that you find people dead? I mean, or that you find people in such dire straits in the inner city in Victoria? Personally,
I'm burying around 2 a month, and ever since I arrived, I'm well known on the streets, and that's so I'm burying around 2 a month. Often from the overdoses of that pure heroin that's around the West, and often their deaths are not investigated by the authorities. They're found dead, and that's it.
Do you even know who they are?
Well, I usually know who they are. Victoria's a lot smaller than Vancouver, so with myself, I usually know I know most of the street people in Victoria.
So is that really where your work sort of revolves around? I mean, it's, I don't know Victoria very well, so maybe you could describe a little bit about sort of the area you're talking about and just sort of paint me a picture of it.
I'm right downtown Victoria. We're in the back of an old church building, Metropolitan United Church. And the core of Victoria is smaller, and most people are doing the panhandling thing, and people at the Open Door deal with are adults, not the youth. We try and separate the adults from the youth. The youth have a place to go. We deal with the adults. Mainly addicted people, the mentally ill come to the Open Door. And we are what I like to call a living room for downtown. We're a place where people go and they're safe. There's always coffee on, there's sandwiches on. I have, luckily enough, to have a couple of pool tables and ping pong table. And I do advocacy mainly from the office, meaning I do everything from funerals, visit people in the hospitals, talk to a social worker, a lawyer, an ex-wife, whatever.
So, and then people just come and ask you about those kind of things, do they? I mean, they say that they need your help, or do you intervene? I mean,
no,
where do you?
They walk in and they ask for the. Open Door has always worked on a philosophy of unconditional love in a non-judgmental way to all that entered the door. That's really hard to live by.
I was going to say, I mean, how do you...
That's difficult.
I mean, we would all love to live that way. I mean, in an unconditional love and non-judgmental way, that's how most of us would like to see ourselves and would like to be. But as we all know, you know, putting that into practice is a lot harder. So
yeah,
how do you do it?
We really, really struggle with that, and constantly reminding ourselves, and the staff reminding ourselves of that type of thing.
The other question I have is, when you're dealing with people who have such stresses in their life, I mean, perhaps they're homeless, perhaps they're hungry, perhaps they're unemployed, perhaps they're addicted, perhaps they're mentally ill. What is, I mean, the question is, what is unconditional love? And what is non-judgment? Because we hear different stories. Some people advocate tough love. Other people would disagree with what we know as tough love.
Try and follow a biblical thing of walking with them where they are. So when they come and just want a coffee, that's where they are. If they come in to the office and talk about a treatment center, detox, that's where we are, and that's what we assist happening. But rather than going out and preaching to them about that's where they should be, and they know where they should be. These are usually long-time users that I'm involved with and ministering with and sharing with. Just accepting them where they are on that particular day.
Mm-hmm. And are people there helping you? I mean, like, you're not alone. I mean, you're the...
No, there's a staff of five, including myself. They're doing the same type of work that I'm doing, so it's an exciting ministry down here.
You must see a lot of the same people. I mean, because it's a small community and because a lot of people are sort of living in that area, you must see a lot of the same people, do you?
Yeah, I think you would, but probably like Vancouver, a lot of transits come into Victoria and are there for a short time. And there is a stable population that comes to the Open Door, stable community that comes in. But there is always, I'd say, at least 60% are not, that come in that are different, that we don't know, that do not normally come.
Mm-hmm. And this is sponsored by the United Church, is it?
It's sponsored by the United Church of Canada, yes.
Yeah. Now, how do you deal with it personally? I mean, to see such suffering. I mean, it has to be hard sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard, and I think that. It's a ministry which really brings me to the edge of that, of the call of Christ.
Say more about what that means.
Well, for me, it means being. I'll tell it with a story. Okay. A fella, one leg, named Martin, takes an alcoholic seizure, falls off his wheelchair, and when he does. He loses control of his bowel movements. He's covered, running down his legs. I put him on the wheelchair and wheel him to a place called Streetlink. We didn't have showers at that time. Undress the man and have a hard time doing this. This isn't an easy task. Shower him and put Colada, shampoo, which is for his lice and his body lice and head lice. And at that point, I'm having a hard time doing that. Wow, what a job, And finally get him in some new clothes. Wheel him to the hospital to get him checked out now after we got him all cleaned up. And he was a native fella. He had this shiny hair and these big, big eyes. And he just looked up to me and he said, "God bless you." And it was like at that moment, Christ was within him saying, "God bless you." And it was like, I was like, doubting Thomas, who always wanted to see the sores, and all of a sudden, Christ appeared. It's that type of walk. It's a type of walk that calls us into the Good Friday world. And that's a tough place to be. But I think that's where the gospel's calling the church to be.
The Good Friday world. Say a little more about the Good Friday world that you know in the inner city in Victoria.
The Good Friday world is one where the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the judgment, the suffering of the poor is getting greater, the gap between the poor and the rich again, the myths of poverty are growing larger and not being dispelled as we'd hoped and thought we were doing in the church for a long time. It's a world in which people are literally hungry. It's places where people sleep in the most horrid positions. It's people where the mentally ill are on our street with little or no help and support. A woman this morning on the street, mentally ill woman who I met, and I tried to take the open door but didn't want to come. And I called the emergency health team, and they just couldn't respond because they weren't on our list. And I knew that if my dog was walking down and feeling like that, like the pound would pick my dog up and take it in, but here was a woman. So that's a Good Friday world, I know. Okay.
How do we bridge some of those gaps? I mean, you say that the gap is getting, and there's no question in this country, as it is in many other places, but in Canada, it's a real shift. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and there's a bigger and bigger gap. But how do we help to bridge those gaps? And how do we, maybe more importantly, how do we bridge the gaps for seeing the suffering? That some see the suffering and some don't.
When you say the word we, I'm going to assume the church.
Okay.
Okay, because that we is a big word. So I'm going to assume the church, and I'm going to say that there's a language of politicians and there's a language of the church. When those two languages clash, the church should be, what in Alan Bosak's words, in a holy rage. We should be speaking up. We are the ones, the church and many people outside the church helped build a country built on a philosophy that our most important resource was our people. We have changed that, and now we're under a philosophy that economy is our most important factor. The church should be in holy rage about that. We should be standing up, and basically, when I say church, I'm speaking capital C, all churches here, not just the United Church of Canada, are verily whispering about it. We're concerned still about ourselves. So what should we do? How should we build a gap? We should be there. We should be in real solidarity. We should be willing to suffer. We should be willing to give our very lives in this Good Friday world for that which is worthy to die for.
Then why don't we? Why? What stops us? I mean, that's where it starts. I mean, obviously,
we have become. I believe, especially in our church, we become internal, navel-gazing, concerned about self and self-survival. We are a middle-class church, struggling with middle-class questions.
Middle-class church, middle-class questions.
Which is different from the world that I'm in, the world of the poor, the world which I believe the gospel calls us to.
Okay. But the gospel calls people there too. I mean, the gospel isn't absent from anywhere, really, is it?
No, it's not absent from there. I'm just saying that I really think that the church should be engaged in that struggling and suffering in a real way. That should be part of the focus of the Christian church.
Okay. At the same time, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate
here.
Ahead. Okay.
Oh,
at the same time, while we know that there is that kind of suffering in inner city and in many places, many corners of the world, there's no question. We see it on our TV screens. We walk by people, and we're not immune to the hurt. At the same time, there are many people in the middle class who are feeling very vulnerable and very threatened. Deep down inside, there's almost a fear is, if I lose my job, how many paychecks, am I 3 paychecks, 3 missing paychecks till I'm on the street myself? Those kind of things. So, I mean, that you have to, how do you sort of get people to see the bigger picture and the suffering of others when they're feeling so threatened themselves?
That's a very good question. Even if our church was addressing those type of questions, even if that church was addressing those type of questions, I think we would be faithful. Even if the church was yelling out about those type of issues, I think we would be faithful. I don't hear the church, I hear individuals in the church, Mary and Bess, others in the church, speaking those type of words. But as a body, as a larger body, I don't see us even yelling out about those issues, Brad. Mm-hmm. So there's my concern. It's not that we would center only on the poorest of the poor.
Right.
But if we centered even on the recently, the great cutbacks in government, which have laid off countless middle-class people.
And many of those people may never find jobs again, or where will they?
Education, nurses, and on and on and on. All of those areas that's being cut back. What are we, the church, what are we saying about that? How are we speaking out about that? What are we doing? How are we suffering with those people?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, of course, is it a fear of conflict? Is it a fear of riling people up? I mean, what
I think it is it's like, I guess it's like our own. I draw back to myself now. As my job, as the price goes up and as salaries go down, you start to worry about your own mortgage, your own bills, your own self, your own. So we become then worried more internal. That's a normal human reaction.
Natural, yeah.
Natural.
Very natural.
Yeah, very. I just challenge the church in saying, and that's what the church does too, as a body. Natural.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I believe the social gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ, calls us beyond the walls of Jerusalem.
And then the call is to go beyond the comfortable pew, beyond the safe places, beyond the security, beyond what we know in our everyday world.
That's right.
Obviously, there's people that are at the Open Door Ministry who come from various parts of Victoria, various church people who do volunteer work. And how are they changed?
They're changed profoundly. They're changed profoundly. There's a fellow by the name of Jack that I just love him. He's doing our clothing now, and he just he came with judgments and understanding of the poor, and to see him 4 months later, and now asking himself questions about his church and his own actions of people, and seeing him get little gifts from somebody. Someone brings him in a little gift for her, you know, something he did for. It's just a transformation that takes place, a complete transformation of years and years.
What brought him down there in the first place? Because a lot of, you say he came with judgments and misconceptions about the poor. So what got him out of his home and down there in the first place?
Actually, his wife did. He was,
Maybe he'd retired or something?
He was retired.
Okay, so he needed something to do.
And she said, listen, why don't you just go down the Open Door and volunteer your time? And he did.
And he did.
And he did. And he came, and he is now one of our greatest assets.
Yeah. It strikes me that is always one of the things that motivates us for change, is when we get to know other people, when we actually take the chance and put ourselves in a different place with different people and see that the reality isn't what we thought it was. But often what prevents us is fear. How do we get over the fear? Like, what prevents us from making that move in the first place?
Some of us will never get over the fear, I guess. Fear is always tackled head-on, the same as all of our fears. If one is free to driving in a car, the best thing to do is to get in the car. One person asked me, you know, I'm really scared to stop around a panhandler. You know, what should I do around a panhandler? There's all these questions in Victoria. We're a little smaller.
Right, okay.
Around panhandlers, Victoria. But, you know, I said, you don't have to stop walking. You don't have to give any money. But at least we could do is say, have a good day, or hello. The person on the sidewalk with the hand out is human being. Yeah. And I guess that's the first stop. The first stop is simply saying hi.
What about that other group of people in the country who are, for most of us, nameless and faceless? We don't know who they are. People like the editorial writers of the Globe and Mail who attacked Marianne Best, the United Church moderator, when she said that, you know, in this madness to cut the deficit, there is going to be a human cost, and people are being hurt. And there are a lot of people in very comfortable positions, which they accuse Marianne of being, of course, who have no need to worry, who can slash jobs, slash costs, and not see the human cost. How do we reach those people? Or how do those people begin to step across the street?
Okay.
Is that a fair?
I'm not quite
understanding the question.
Just bring me through it again.
Okay, that's what I was afraid. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, we talked about people like your volunteers, who've come to the Inner City Mission in Victoria and done some work. Now I want to know, how do we reach people? How do you reach people to see the reality of the suffering? Those who are in boardrooms and editorialists for newspapers, those who are in government ministries, the kinds of places.
Okay, I think what we have to do in that case is we have to not only complain about the cutbacks in social services and in health and in education, because it's in three major areas. We have to point to another direction, other ways that we could tackle this debt, because it is a major problem in the country.
Okay, good.
So
yeah.
it's a major problem, and we shouldn't deny that. But there's other ways that we could be attacking, alternate form of taxation. When the directors of the banks received last year, Royal Banks, of the Canadian banks, received bonuses up to $1 million after their salaries. You know, when we're dealing with that type of variation, we're talking about corporations, banks making large. Where is a justice around that type of wealth? I mean, you look around Victoria and Vancouver, for example, the wealth is just, you know, blatant in our face. And yet, you know, there's a human cost. What about the human cost being at the other end of the scale for a change?
And I think it's easy when we're surrounded, if we're in the circumstances of being comfortable, it's easy not to see, isn't it?
Very easy not to see, and it's so easy to point our finger at there's the problem. The problem is that unemployed person, you know.
And also the other attitude, of course, is, well, if I could do it, why can't somebody else?
Yeah. You know, like I'm a professional and have a job. My 4 sisters and my family grew up on welfare. And 2 of them are still on welfare. 2 of them are women. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe the opportunities weren't there. Maybe we're not the same people.
Do you notice a different spirit in the country, though, in the land? I mean, in terms of the attitude toward social services and helping people?
For me, it's such a sad spirit. So, because, you know, like I see myself among many faces over the last 20 years of my life and many people's lives, of working on issues of poverty, of working on that social net, of actually building it up, of building sense of showing, and watching that being ripped down, pulled apart. I mean, it's such a feeling of loss of hope, of not knowing what to do, of looking for more allies, of, I guess, being human too, of looking for someone to blame, you know.
Right, and looking for someone to blame, and wanting it to change, but not knowing how it's going to change.
Not knowing how it changed, and seeing that, especially out west, now we're on the tip of that iceberg. I think we are heading into the direction of the east, of Ontario and other
Do you really?
Oh yeah, I think we're heading there.
Do you get many people from Ontario coming into Victoria lately?
No, not more than, I don't think more than normal. I think that's you know, I mean, for the difference in welfare isn't that great to move 4,000 miles, you know.
Just but the difference in the climate is.
Yeah,
I mean, the difference in the climate is tremendous, isn't it?
Yes,
and of course, there we go, we gloat and so on. Where do you get your hope to sustain you? I mean, obviously, it takes a great deal of energy.
I have a strong meditative life. I write in a journal. I pray. I read scripture every day. And if I don't, I'm sort of like Beethoven said. If I don't one day, I know it. If I don't 2 days, the people I work with notice it. You know, if I don't do it for 3 days, everyone around me notices it. Mm-hmm. It's just that's which sustains me.
What does Jesus mean to you? How do you understand Jesus?
I understand Jesus as a challenge for me to live with hope and with a light in the darkness of the situation, that I'm amidst in this, what I call the Good Friday world, within the context of poverty, within the context of the street, to bring hope, a laughter, to be able to see Jesus in the most unlikely situations at the most unlikely times. And
can you give me an example?
Yeah, I can. In the mornings, early in the mornings, some of the women of the night will come in early in the mornings, and they'll talk about their business at night. And I'm there among them, and often listening and involved in the conversation. And as I'm sitting there listening, I think, what a gift Christ has given me right now. To be in the midst of something that most people wouldn't have a hope of being, especially the church. Like, the church is present in that discussion at that moment, because I represent a church. You know, I'm an ordained minister within the church. And to be there among this rich, flavorous conversation and be trusted with that, for me is a blessing of great measure.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And the Open Door Ministry, of course, every time your name has come up, we've had the phone number, so the Open Door Ministry also is willing to be supported and volunteers.
We're not supported by the government, which I'm really, really glad of, because that way we don't have to worry about cutbacks. And I can say some things about policy and direction of government, which many agencies that are supported by the government can't. So
you're able. That's right. So you're able to criticize and also sort of give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. I'm going to say two things. I think, you know, like when you're in Vancouver, if you're
we're taping this show in Vancouver,
and then you're listening in Vancouver, I would always direct the money to First United Church. I don't know if they'd say that if they were here, but that's what I would say. And if you're in Victoria, then the ministry of the Open Door could certainly be supported.
Those are two very worthy places where people are served.
Very, very worthy.
And your calling then is to serve the people of the inner city.
My calling is to serve people of the inner city. And, you know, Brad, ministry is funny. I'm served more by them and ministered more from them than often I could possibly minister to.
Just from the joy that I feel from you, and just from the aura and the radiation, I can tell that you are. I mean, it's been wonderful to have you here on Pressure Point.
It's good to see you after 15 years.
I know, a long time. You haven't changed at all, Alan. It's great. Good. I've been talking with Alan Tysick, who is the director of the Open Door Ministry in Victoria, which is an inner city mission serving inner city people. And you've been watching Pressure Point. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brad Newcombe.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.